This Future Cities Africa episode is presented by Wesgro, the official tourism, trade and investment promotion agency for Cape Town and the Western Cape. Monika Iuel, Chief Destination Marketing Officer at Wesgro, is my guest today. We discuss tourism after the Great Disruption. Monika, welcome. The digital world is the new normal for the world and for the tourism industry to recover and grow. How can it find the best ways to leverage technological solutions?
Definitely, the digital trends have been going on since long before COVID, and they've just really been put on steroids through the pandemic. For a lot of us, digital was the only means of communication for a very long time during the pandemic. And I think it's created an additional level of comfort with tech and a specific kind of expectation, both from the traveler as well as from the industry, in terms of what tech can enable. Certainly here at Wesgro, as the DMO, our leisure tourism promotion activities have always had a digital element. But again, through COVID and beyond, we have more and more embraced the power of digital when it comes to bringing destinations into the hearts and homes of consumers, both domestically as well as abroad. So using your destination promotional channels digitally, I think is now pretty much the mainstay of any DMO. But further to that, any business that wants to promote itself to the traveler or to the tourism industry value chain, digital is always the primary consideration now, and even more so mobile first. So we are finding more and more that your digital platforms that really do well are the ones that have been designed for mobile first, and really where the website or whatever other technical developments are being done are a secondary consideration, because more and more we're consuming our content on our mobile devices, even more so than before the pandemic. So that's definitely the one thing that if you don't have a digital strategy yet, you really are behind the curve. And if you don't have a mobile strategy, then again, you need to really get going on that. The other thing that's become really, really apparent in this digital age is that digital has given us the ability to create contactless travel experiences and seamless travel experiences, with everything from uploading your QR code of your vaccine certificate into your flight booking, through to checking in online through the hotel's website before you've even arrived, so that you don't have to worry about standing at a counter to check in, and all of the things in between. Utilizing tech to make your business smarter, safer, more seamless has become really important, and it is more and more a consumer expectation. There is a degree of irritation now with paper processes and with protracted long manual processes to get a particular function done. So any business out there that's going to succeed is going to succeed with a digital strategy.
With traveler numbers rising again, what new trends and insights do you see emerging?
I think there are some real sort of human insights that are becoming really apparent. And I think that there is a logical linkage to, therefore, how people travel, what they look for when they travel, that we can make from those insights. The first one that is really striking for us here at Wesgro's DMO is the insight that our relationship with mortality has changed. I think the globe is coming out of a time where we've been counting deaths daily. We've all had the really sad realities of loved ones and family members and colleagues that have succumbed to this horrible disease. And so what that's really sort of created is the sense of life being short, and that there really is no more excuse for putting off all of those things that you've always dreamed of doing and have always wanted to do. So there's, even in the travel space, I would say there's a degree of urgency now that perhaps prior to the pandemic didn't exist. People really want to do the things that they've always said that they wanted to do. And that really has two results for us in the travel space. The first, I think, is that you have a far stronger propensity for adventure in the consumers that are traveling at the moment. Again, life is short, so why not try something new? Why not be adventurous? And the second one is this, journey of a lifetime sentiment. It's all really now about making memories. It's about traveling with your loved ones. It's about reconnecting with friends that you haven't seen for a while. And it's really about experiences and not things as we go into the future, which is encouraging for tourism. The other insight, which we can see in South Africa and the Western Cape, is that people are traveling local first and potentially doing global or long haul later, which has been fantastic. I mean, the domestic tourism revenue stream has been the lifeblood of the tourism industry in the Western Cape province for the last 2 years, without a doubt. Even pre-pandemic, more than 60% of the tourism revenues generated within the province are from people that live in the province. And I think that that's an insight, and that's a market that we have really started to tackle here in the DMO at Wesgro now. And then similarly, identifying those domestic travelers that perhaps previously never really understood what their own country has to offer, despite the fact that people come from as far afield as Toronto to come and experience this country. They've never perhaps had the opportunity to experience some of it for themselves. And so I believe that we've created, through these various lockdown experiences, we've created a market for ourselves within the Western Cape that we potentially did not have before. And I think that there is an appreciation for what the Western Cape and Cape Town have to offer that will continue even after our domestic travelers are able to go elsewhere, because they like to travel local now, but also because I think they've taken a shine to what this country and what this province have to offer. So that's the other one. Multi-generational travel is, definitely on the rise. I think there's a nostalgia also that we're seeing both internationally and locally. There's the desire to want to redo all of those things that you would, had good memories of whilst you were being locked down, that you now want to redo and revisit. And again, the Western Cape has always had a very high repeater rate, both domestically and internationally. So that's going to be encouraging for us into the future, that we hope that a lot more travelers will come back to Cape Town and the Western Cape because they had some of their best memories here and reconnect with loved ones and family whilst they're here. The other trend that's coming out quite strongly in the international market in particular is this concept of conscious travel. So, because travel now even more is something that's restrictive, it's potentially a little bit more risky even, because you might, your vaccine certificate might not be accepted, or something might happen in your destination whilst you're there, or at home whilst you're away. So people, when they travel, really make a conscious decision to travel with some real strong emotional benefits that they expect out of it. And we talk about, doing good through travel. You do good for yourself, obviously, because, you get to relax and you get to maybe, reconnect and have some transformative experiences for yourself. But similarly, also, it's important, I think, more now than ever, that travelers get a sense that they do good by traveling to the place that they're going to. And so whether that's carbon footprint offsetting, or whether that is social responsibility activities, voluntourism, really just understanding that tourism has the power to transform a place. I think one of the interesting side effects of having had a travel ban situation, both domestically and in some of our markets, is that I think stakeholders and economists have created a deeper understanding of the halo effect and the economic benefits that tourism actually have for a place. Because it isn't just the direct spend, it isn't just the direct employment. It's really the benefits to a place. And anyone that's walked up and down St. George's Mall in the midst of lockdown can attest to what, tourism does for a place. And hopefully that will also continue into the future, that there is at all levels an understanding that tourism actually doesn't damage a place. It actually does good for its people, for its revenues, for its economy, and for the tax base. So that's something that certainly from a consumer perspective, we try to demonstrate here at Wesgro, is that coming to the Western Cape does good for your soul, but it also does good for the place. And then lastly, just on the cruise side of things, Cruise Cape Town is one of the projects within Wesgro's DMO. And we are seeing a far stronger interest in the expedition ships and the smaller cruise liners, who traditionally are packed with experiences. It's a fully inclusive cruise experience. And people want to be on smaller ships, and they want to have as many experiences as possible offered to them when they go on their cruises. So those are just some of the insights that at the moment are keeping us at Wesgro busy.
You've mentioned that the impacts of tourism doesn't simply stop when money is exchanged from for example, a tourist and a restaurant. How does leisure tourism further affect a local economy? And can you share an example?
My classic example is always the Neisner Featherbed restaurant. The Featherbed restaurant, when it closed, didn't only put the waitresses and the chefs that worked at the restaurant out of business, it also put the taxi driver out of business that was shuttling the staff home from their dinner service. It also put pressure on the local fresh produce delivery who lost their revenue stream. So I always say tourism is an apex industry, and the halo effect of that industry into a community, into the fiscus, is far, far greater than just measuring how many people slept at the hotel or how many people rented a car.
Monica, thank you. On remote work and in many cases the ability to work from anywhere, how do you see the future of work evolving and how is the Western Cape positioned to maximize the economic benefits of this new way of working?
Certainly here at Wesgro, we can see that some staff like to be in the office or need to be in the office, and some staff like to be fluid in that space, and some people prefer to work from home, and some people can really work from anywhere. Certainly, what we're seeing in terms of the tourism arrivals is that the length of stay is increasing, which is great for us. People obviously come here and then, potentially do a couple of weeks of holiday and then, spend a couple of weeks here doing work in between. In this new era, there are a substantial amount of solopreneurs. I mean, I think that started with the WeWork development. There's a lot of people who are their own office. They just need a laptop and they can pretty much operate from anywhere. And certainly, I think Cape Town and the Western Cape are well poised to capture a lion's share of that market that wants to work from, this continent. South Africa is a very popular destination, but certainly Cape Town and the Western Cape within that context has got the most stable power provision, has got some of the best connectivity in terms of, Wi-Fi hotspots in coffee shops, etc. The amount of co-working spaces that we have in the city in particular is probably the greatest in the country. And then, of course, you've got the wide open spaces in between. So I don't know if you saw that little piece of creative that we did last year of sitting at Buckhaven Beach doing your work, pretending to be at your desk. It really is a place where you can combine scenic beauty, wide open spaces with Africa's tech capital and all the first world creature comforts that anyone from an international market could want in order to be able to work from here. I mean, we do have to be clear that at the moment the South African visa regime doesn't allow for digital nomad visas, but we do hope that the submissions that have been made in that regard are being heard at the highest levels, so that we can be sure to start maximizing from the digital nomad, the global digital nomad, even more so.
And how much have travelers' expectations changed in recent times? Can you mention some examples?
I think travelers' expectations have changed quite substantially in that they really want to experience deep and immersive and transformative experiences outside of their own homes now. I think that McDonald's travel or fast food travel, let me rather say fast food travel, is a thing of the past, pretty much. I think that people that travel now really want to travel. It is quite daunting. I myself am going overseas for the first time at the end of this week. And it's quite daunting. You don't know whether you have all the right documentation. You don't know if something's going to go wrong whilst you're traveling. It's not as affordable as when it was fast food travel. You've really got to want to go, and so you do then ultimately have a substantially higher level of expectation when you have such a conscious decision that's been made around traveling. I think that Cape Town and the Western Cape are well positioned to meet those expectations of having a transformative experience. And as our marketing campaigns always say, get in a good space in Cape Town and the Western Cape. People, when they travel now, want to be able to set themselves free from the constraints and the fears and the extreme governance and the extreme regulatory frameworks that they've experienced at home, and they want to have a sense of freedom and a sense of connection, whether they're traveling alone and just want to meet the locals, or whether they're traveling with their families and friends and want to sort of reconnect with those. That real sort of deep emotional desire to, set yourself free, I think is a really, really strong driver in leisure tourism into the future.
Speaking specifically to the domestic traveler, what are the challenges to a destination marketing organization or DMO to retain that traveler now that the world is opening up again?
One of the key reasons why the tourism industry in the Western Cape and indeed South Africa was able to derive revenues from the tourism rand, not dollar, domestic traveler over the last 2 years was because a lot of the product suppliers and experience providers took a different stance to their pricing models. And so a 5-star safari experience that would ordinarily have cost you 20,000 Rand per person sharing a night was being priced at 4,000 Rand per person sharing a night, which is still a lot of money, but it is substantially more accessible to the domestic traveler and consequently was taken up quite substantially. And I think that we ignore the domestic traveler into the future at our peril. So I think that the challenge to the industries, and I know that our colleagues at Cape Town Tourism have placed that same challenge in front of the industry, is we need to not forget our domestic traveler even after we're able to welcome international tourists into our destinations and into our hotels again. It doesn't really, we can't be prescriptive about what that strategy needs to be, but I would strongly urge the tourism industry to still have a strategy around domestic to make sure that we don't lose those travelers again, because ultimately a week in Mauritius cannot cost you less than 2 nights in a hotel in Cape Town. That's just not a feasible value proposition, and under those circumstances we are going to lose those domestic travelers again, as much as they would love to continue to travel. So I think affordability is a real sort of consideration that the industry needs to have a look at. Obviously, the industry needs to recover. They need to recoup all those monies that they lost over that period, and so everyone needs to make a profit. That's obviously acceptable. But having a strategy around the domestic tourist and having a strategy around the price expectation of that domestic tourist, I think, is paramount.
And Monika, what emerging disruptors and new challenges do you foresee for the tourism industry over the next 1 to 5 years? And how can these challenges be addressed?
I think the big disruptor is going to be that the new consumer that's starting to travel now is your millennial and even younger than the millennials. And, I'm in my 50s, so I'm not going to say that I know anything about that. But, the places where these consumers are things that businesses need to understand. I'm thinking metaverse, I'm thinking TikTok versus Instagram, I'm thinking, all of these sort of areas in which we find these consumers now, and any DMO worth itself needs to work consumer in. They can't work from themselves out. And so making sure that you have an understanding of who your consumer is, what they like, where they like to be, and how they like to consume content, and how they like to engage with content, I think is paramount. I think that we ignore the younger population at our peril. Even in multi-generational travel, the statistics say that it's the youngsters that decide where the whole gang of family goes. So being able to access that consumer and that demographic is going to be more and more important, and getting a grip on where they consume their content is the central question that needs to be answered there. And then I think, disruptors, interestingly, of course, can never be forecast. 5 days before Uber existed, no one would have been able to say that was going to be what it is, or Airbnb, etc., etc. Certainly, I think the thing that you can say is that tech will be at the center of whatever the next disruptor is. And that we as a DMO need to just keep an eye out on that. I think metaverse is definitely the space that we need to have a very, very active look at. And then from an industry perspective, finding more ways for a seamless, contactless bespoke, personalized travel experience, I think it is, again, more important. Perhaps also what hopefully will stay with us for a little while longer is the appreciation that I think a traveler had over the last 2 years of having someone to call. And I think that there's an opportunity for tech to disrupt that. So, when we were all stuck in destinations that were locking down and we had to get home, the ones that had a travel agent to phone or someone that could bail them out were the ones that were better looked after than the ones that had to, figure things out for themselves. And finding ways that aren't a WhatsApp bot or a website bot, finding ways to provide personalized, bespoke service at scale, I think is going to be one of the key disruptors into the future. And then the last one, I think, which is quite important, is that this flexibility thing is going to become more and more appreciated. I'm sure a lot of tourism product out there can confirm that more and more the ticket that gets booked, the flight ticket as an example that gets booked, isn't necessarily the cheap one that's not transferable and not changeable with 100% cancellation fees. More and more you're finding that people are going to be booking the flight that they can change and that they can get a refund on, and that, if there is something that's going to change on that. So creating value adds that you can actually charge for are on the rise, and I think will continue to rise for a couple of years to come.
A big thank you to Monika Iuel, Chief Destination Marketing Officer at Wesgro, for such an insightful conversation around tourism after the Great Disruption.